So I want you to imagine waking up to your phone just blaring in the pitch black of early morning.
Oh, that is the worst feeling.
Right. It's not your alarm clock. It's a reverse 911 call. And a recorded voice on the other end is instructing you to immediately evacuate your home.
And I mean, if you're living in Southern California, your brain probably skips straight to the usual suspects.
Exactly. You know, you might wonder if a wildfire has breached the hills, or if you somehow, slept through the initial tremors of an earthquake.
But the voice isn't warning you about a natural disaster at all?
No, you are being ordered to abandon your home because a nearby industrial tank, which is, a piece of infrastructure you likely never even knew was there, is on the verge of exploding.
Yeah, that abrupt transition from total safety to immediate invisible danger is exactly what unfolded for, roughly 40,000 residents in Orange County.
It's just wild.
It really is. It's an enormous ongoing emergency that has turned a massive suburban footprint into an absolute ghost town.
And that is exactly what today's deep dive is plunging into. We are looking straight at the mechanics of that very crisis happening right now in Garden Grove, California.
And we've got a really solid stack of sources for this, right?
We do. We have gathered real-time updates from the ground, accounts from, frankly, frantic residents who were forced to flee, and some incredibly blunt press briefings from the officials trying to manage the threat.
Which is so rare to see.
Totally. So our mission today is to cut through the chaotic noise of those emergency alerts. We are going to piece together the physics of what is actually trapped inside that tank, unpack the mechanical failures making it so impossible to fix, and really look at the intense psychological and logistical toll this takes on the people caught in the crossfire.
Because understanding the architecture of this specific crisis illuminates a much broader reality about, the fragile logistics of modern manufacturing.
Yeah, that's a great point.
We live in a society that requires extremely hazardous materials to produce everyday goods, And those materials are often housed right in the middle of densely populated communities.
Hiding in plain sight.
Exactly. And when the engineered systems meant to contain those materials fail, the ripple effects are just immediate and staggering.
The geography of this specific failure is, it's a perfect example of that hidden proximity.
Yeah.
This facility is located in Garden Grove.
Right.
And for anyone visualizing the area, we are talking about a densely packed landscape situated dangerously close to major tourist hubs.
Yeah, I think it's, about 5 miles from Disneyland?
Yes, roughly 5 miles from Disneyland and just 4 miles from Knott's Berry Farm. And the epicenter of this entire massive disruption is just a single tank.
Just one.
Just one. But that one tank is holding 7,000 gallons of a chemical called methacrylate.
Right, methacrylate, or MMA, as they call it. It's a foundational chemical compound. The vast majority of the time, it is simply a workhorse ingredient used to manufacture the acrylic plastics that are just ubiquitous in our daily lives.
Okay, so it's common.
Very common. But its stability is highly dependent on its environment. In its liquid form, particularly when it becomes volatile and begins to transition into a vapor, it transforms into an incredibly aggressive hazard.
And the health warnings on this are serious.
Oh, absolutely. The Environmental Protection Agency, along with Orange County Health Officer Dr. Regina Chinsio-Kwong, they've explicitly warned about the biological impact of exposure.
What happens if you are exposed?
It causes major respiratory issues, severe irritation to the lungs and nasal passages, as well as, intense dizziness and nausea.
Wow. And looking at the notes on how this chemical behaves in the open air, it outlines some very deceptive properties, like MMA is heavier than air.
Which is crucial here.
Yeah, and it also produces a distinct fruit-like scent. But the officials are actively warning residents that relying on their senses is a really dangerous game here.
You cannot trust your nose.
Right. Smelling something fruity doesn't necessarily mean you've had enough exposure to trigger symptoms, and conversely, you could be in immediate danger without detecting a strong warning scent at all.
Yeah, the sensory indicators completely fail as reliable safety gauges in this context.
It's basically a malfunctioning pressure cooker filled with a toxic, fruity-smelling fog.
That is a terrifying but very accurate analogy. And the heavier than air property, it fundamentally changes the physics of how a hazard moves through an environment.
Does so?
Well, unlike smoke or steam, which, naturally rises and dissipates into the upper atmosphere, a heavier vapor sinks.
Oh, so it hugs the ground.
Exactly. If released, it looks for low-lying areas. It settles into gutters, it rolls down sloped streets, it pools in basements. It behaves much more like a heavy, invisible flood moving through a neighborhood than a traditional airborne gas.
Okay, but let me push back on the logistics of that for a second.
Sure.
If the primary characteristic of this chemical vapor is that it is heavy and sinks to the lowest possible point, why are they clearing out a massive 9 square mile radius?
That's a fair question.
Right. I mean, if it operates like an invisible flood, shouldn't it just pool in the immediate parking lot and the adjacent streets of the industrial park? Evacuating 40,000 people seems completely disproportionate to a heavy vapor leak.
Well, it would be disproportionate if this were merely a leak.
Oh.
Yeah. The massive evacuation zone is driven by the fact that the primary threat is an imminent explosion.
Oh. Okay, that changes things.
Completely. Unified Incident Commander Craig Covey, he was uncompromising about this distinction in his briefings. He described the chemical as highly volatile, highly toxic, and highly flammable.
So not just a slow leak.
No, a leak implies a slow, passive release of material that gravity can sort of dictate. An explosion is a violent, kinetic event.
And an explosion throws gravity right out the window.
Entirely. If the tank explodes, the containment vessel shatters, and that liquid MMA is instantly aerosolized and ignited. Commander Covey emphasized that the moment an explosion happens, the wind direction takes total control of the situation.
Because, as he bluntly stated, we cannot control the weather.
Exactly. So a 9 square mile evacuation zone isn't about where the heavy gas might slowly drift. It is about accounting for the blast radius, the immediate thermal event, and the subsequent toxic plume that would be violently pushed across the county by, meteorological conditions that shift minute by minute.
Wow, that shifts the perspective entirely.
Yeah.
It really does. And I guess it also explains the extreme caution from the health department.
Yeah, Dr. Chinxiu Kwong pointed out something really alarming. She noted that there are very few documented cases of human interaction with a large-scale event involving this specific material under these conditions.
So they are kind of flying blind here.
To a certain degree, yes. If this tank goes up, the cascading effects of a population-level exposure are just completely unpredictable.
That is terrifying.
They have to assume the worst-case scenario because historical data on an event of this magnitude simply does not exist.
Which means when the top health official publicly acknowledges that they are entering unique territory with, limited information, standard operating procedure dictates clearing the board.
You remove the variables. And in this case, the variables are 40,000 human lives.
Which brings us to the timeline of how those 40,000 lives were disrupted. Because when you map out the sequence of events, it reads less like a straightforward emergency and more like a psychological whiplash for the residents.
Oh, absolutely.
The evacuation orders didn't just happen once. They were an on-again, off-again roller coaster.
The timeline is a textbook example of how mechanical failures compound, right? And they often mask the true severity of a crisis until it is almost too late.
So where does it start?
The incident did not begin with an explosion or a catastrophic rupture. It began on Thursday with a vapor release. Orange County Fire Authority Interim Fire Chief T.J. McGovern explained that one of the 3 tanks at the site began experiencing a spontaneous increase in temperature.
So the chemical is just heating itself up.
Yeah, and heat is the absolute enemy of stability in chemical storage. An increase in temperature translates directly to an increase in kinetic energy at the molecular level.
Meaning it wants to expand.
Exactly. The liquid MMA tries to expand, transitioning into a gas, which drastically spikes the pressure inside the sealed steel tank.
But the safety systems kicked in, right?
They did. The facility's safety systems initially functioned exactly as designed. The rising pressure activated a relief valve, which is essentially a mechanized exhaust pipe, and that vented the excess vapor into the air to prevent the tank from bursting.
And they also had overhead sprinklers going.
Right. Simultaneously, overhead cooling sprinklers activated to douse the exterior.
And it's worth noting here that the facility managed the other 2 tanks on the site successfully.
Yes, that's true.
They were either neutralized with a separate chemical agent or deemed entirely stable. It was only this single tank that was trapped in this crazy heating cycle.
Right.
And because the safety valve seemed to be working, initial evacuations were ordered for the immediate surrounding area on Thursday, but they were largely precautionary.
But the venting of that vapor actually created a really dangerous false sense of security.
How so?
By Thursday night, the vapor conditions in the air had improved significantly. Believing the system was stabilizing, the fire department officially lifted the initial evacuation orders.
So people just went home.
Residents went to bed assuming the localized crisis had been completely resolved.
But the relief valve venting the pressure was treating a symptom, not the underlying mechanical disease.
Exactly.
And this is where the timeline turns disastrous. As the hazardous materials crews moved in to physically remove and contain the 7,000 gallons of MMA from the overheated tank, they hit a wall.
A massive wall.
They discovered that the main valve on the tank was damaged.
And that single damaged piece of hardware transforms the entire risk profile of the event.
Because you can't get it out.
Right. A tank with a functional valve is a vessel you can empty. A tank with a damaged valve is a closed-loop system that has fundamentally failed.
No.
You have 7,000 gallons of a highly volatile chemical that has already proven it cannot maintain a stable temperature, and you have absolutely no mechanical way to pump it out.
It is a trapped bomb.
It really is.
And that discovery forces the massive reversal on Friday morning. That is when the scale of the emergency just multiplies, triggering the reverse 911 calls across the 9-square-mile radius.
It was huge.
We're talking about clearing out 13 schools and 2 administrative facilities in the Garden Grove Unified School District in the middle of a Friday morning.
I mean, moving tens of thousands of residents is difficult enough, but coordinating the sudden evacuation of 15 separate school district properties, that introduces a logistical nightmare of epic proportions.
You can clearly see the human toll of that whiplash in the accounts from the ground. Like Diane Chavira, a local resident, she told the CNN affiliate KCAL-KCBS that she was simply sleeping in her house when authorities suddenly banged on her door Friday morning.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, ordering her to drop everything and leave immediately. She described the sheer panic of having to scramble to collect her 4 dogs and flee her own neighborhood without any real understanding of what was actually happening.
It is a profound loss of agency. In a matter of minutes, the fundamental safety of your home is just revoked by an external authority, and you are forced to navigate an environment of total uncertainty.
Yeah, and Jacqueline Riegos, who evacuated from the nearby town of Stanton, she captured the mood of the community perfectly. She described the situation as total chaos, noting the frustration of dealing with the constant coming and going while, quote, nobody knows anything.
Which is so understandable.
She pointed out the agonizing reality that the authorities couldn't give them any concrete details about what was happening or how long they would be displaced.
Her frustration really highlights a massive challenge in crisis communication. The public often interprets a lack of information as institutional incompetence.
Right, like they're just hiding something.
Exactly. But the reality is that the authorities were operating in an information vacuum dictated by the physics of the chemical. If a house is on fire, the physics of combustion are visible, and the mechanics of extinguishing it with water are universally understood.
Sure.
The fire department can give a reasonable estimate of when the flames will be out.
But a closed-loop pressure vessel is entirely different. You can't just point a fire hose at a damaged valve and wash away the danger.
Not at all.
The timeline was being dictated by the thermodynamic behavior of the methyl methacrylate, not by the fire chief.
Which creates a terrifying stalemate. The hazard is entirely structural right up until the millisecond it fails. The authorities are trapped in a waiting game, heavily reliant on the steel containment holding against the internal pressure.
And that stalemate leads directly to a massive clash between the mandates of public safety and the stubborn realities of human nature.
Oh, the holdouts.
The holdouts. Despite the reverse 911 calls, and despite the frantic public pleas from law enforcement, Garden Grove Police Chief Amir El Farah reported a shocking statistic.
This was wild.
15% of the people inside the evacuation area flat out refused to leave. We're talking about roughly 6,000 residents who looked at a mandatory evacuation order for a chemical explosion and decided to stay put in their living rooms.
A 15% refusal rate in a potential blast zone is an incredibly significant challenge for emergency responders.
We have to unpack the psychology of that decision. I mean, why would 6,000 people consciously choose to remain inside a 9-square-mile radius when the fire chief is standing at a podium telling the public that an industrial tank is going to fail? What drives that level of defiance?
It really traces back to the cognitive biases humans use to assess risk, specifically something called the availability heuristic.
Okay, what's that?
We judge the severity of a danger by how easily we can visualize it. In California, a wall of flames cresting a ridge is an easily visualized, terrifying threat. People flee wildfires because the danger is tangible.
Right, you can see the smoke.
Exactly, but a specialized chemical undergoing an invisible phase change inside a steel cylinder miles away. The human brain struggles to process that as an immediate threat to survival.
So the danger is purely statistical to them rather than perceived.
Exactly.
If you're a resident standing on your porch in Garden Grove, your senses are telling you that everything is fine. The sky is blue, there is no smoke on the horizon, and the air outside the immediate industrial park is literally testing as safe.
And when a person's sensory input, like a quiet, sunny neighborhood, directly contradicts the auditory input of a reverse 911 call, human nature defaults to the sensory evidence.
That makes a lot of sense.
Without the visual confirmation of a towering black plume or visible flames, the abstract concept of chemical pressure simply cannot overcome the immediate inconvenience of packing up a car, wrangling pets, and abandoning a home.
But the reality unfolding behind the scenes makes that decision incredibly dangerous. Because the facility's owner, GKN Aerospace Transparency, who CNN did reach out to you for comment, by the way, they brought in their own manufacturer's response team.
Right, the real experts.
These are the technical experts who understand the engineering of the system better than anyone else. They attempted to mitigate the crisis, and they failed.
Yeah, that's when things get really scary.
The experts who built the infrastructure couldn't find a way to bypass the damaged valve safely.
When the specialized engineers exhaust their options, the event officially transitions from an emergency response to a crisis containment scenario.
And Commander Covey outlined the reality of the situation, and it was a grim, zero-sum game.
Very grim.
The best-case scenario he presented was that the steel tank simply cracks under the pressure and leaks all 7,000 gallons of MMA into the surrounding parking lot. The alternative was a catastrophic explosion.
Those were literally the only two outcomes on the table.
And Commander Covey's communication style during these briefings is absolutely fascinating to study. Because bureaucratic communication usually relies on passive, polished language, right? Phrases like, containment strategies are being evaluated or protocols are being implemented.
Oh yeah, lots of jargon.
But Covey abandoned all of that. He stood in front of the press and stated, with raw candor, this thing is going to fail.
Such a powerful quote.
And then he went a step further, admitting that failure was inevitable unless, quote, some brilliant guy behind me here figures out how we can mitigate this incident.
It is exceptionally rare for a unified incident commander to publicly sacrifice the illusion of control like that.
Yeah, it was shocking.
By admitting that the established protocols had failed and that they were hoping for a genius to invent a miracle solution on the fly, he was attempting to shatter the cognitive bias of those 6,000 holdouts.
He was trying to wake them up.
He was using terminal active language to emphasize that the threat wasn't theoretical, it was mechanical, and the mechanics were failing.
The image of officials hoping a brilliant guy can solve a chemical puzzle while a literal pressure cooker ticks down, it just feels like a script from a suspense movie.
It really does.
But thankfully, the data finally began to shift. Friday evening brought a critical change in the tank's internal environment, offering the hazmat teams a very narrow window of opportunity.
Yeah, the thermodynamics finally started working in their favor. Chief McGovern noted that vapor had stopped escaping the tank entirely, and continuous air quality monitoring confirmed the surrounding environment remained safe.
But the true breakthrough was the temperature gauge, right?
Exactly.
Commander Covey announced in a Friday evening update that the temperature of the trapped chemical was finally decreasing. It had slowly dropped down to around 61 degrees, and he noted that they were aiming for 50 degrees, describing that specific temperature as the chemical's happy place.
Describing a highly toxic, volatile compound as having a happy place is just a striking piece of personification.
I thought so too. It really highlights how responders have to conceptualize the behavior of these materials. You cannot force a pressurized chemical to comply with an order. You have to manipulate its environment to calm it down.
And the physics of that happy place dictate the entire response strategy. Think of the internal pressure of that tank like a car balanced precariously on the very edge of a cliff.
Okay, I can picture that.
Every degree of heat increases the kinetic energy of the molecules, inching the car closer to the tipping point where the structural integrity of the steel is overwhelmed by the vapor pressure.
So cooling it down pulls the car back.
Exactly. Lowering the temperature to 50 degrees pulls the car back from the edge. It decreases the kinetic energy, dramatically lowering the pressure, pushing against the damaged valve and the tank walls.
It doesn't fix the broken valve, but it buys them time.
And time is the single most valuable resource in crisis engineering. The lower temperature makes the liquid MMA significantly less volatile. It means the tank is less likely to rupture if it is jostled or manipulated by the crews working around it.
And that drop in temperature paved the way for the final strategy update we received. Covey stated the cooling trend was allowing the teams to reconsider engaging in close proximity to the tank in order to implement what he called outside-the-box concepts.
When standard extraction fails because of a mechanical blockage, the solutions require immense technical precision and physical bravery.
And we don't have the exact blueprints of what those out-of-the-box solutions look like.
Right, they didn't specify.
They might be attempting to artificially freeze the damaged valve to stabilize it, or performing a highly risky hot tap to bore a new extraction point directly into the steel without introducing a spark.
Either way, it's incredibly dangerous.
Whatever the exact method, it involves highly trained individuals working through the night, in close proximity to 7,000 gallons of a highly flammable compound, relying entirely on the hope that the chemical remains in its 50-degree equilibrium.
It is a stark reminder of the intense technical skill required of hazardous materials teams. I mean, they operate as the final physical barrier between a minor mechanical failure and a mass casualty event.
The tension of that standoff is just incredible. And when we pull back and look at the entire scope of what we have covered today, the fragility of the situation is staggering.
It really is.
It all started with a simple mechanical failure, a damaged valve.
Yep.
And that single broken piece of hardware turned 7,000 gallons of a chemical used to manufacture everyday plastics into a heavy, sinking, pressurized threat. It forced the unprecedented evacuation of 40,000 people from the heart of Orange County, basically transforming neighborhoods and schools into an empty grid.
A ghost town.
Yeah. And it left emergency crews playing a high-stakes game of thermodynamics in the dark, desperately trying to bleed the heat away from a metal tank just so they could get close enough to attempt an unproven fix.
It completely exposes the hidden vulnerabilities of the infrastructure we walk past every single day without a second thought.
It absolutely does. And that brings us to a final thought for you to consider long after this deep dive ends. We rarely think about the invisible geography of our modern lives.
We really don't.
We tend to assume that zoning laws naturally segregate heavy, dangerous industrial processes far away from the places where we live our daily lives. But this highly volatile site is just a quick 5-mile drive from the gates of Disneyland.
Right.
It sits adjacent to residential streets and community schools. It forces a very uncomfortable question. How many other everyday manufacturing facilities, housing hundreds of thousands of gallons of volatile, highly toxic materials, are quietly operating just a few miles away from where you sleep, work, and play?
It's unsettling to think about.
They remain completely invisible to the community until the moment a single valve breaks and a recorded voice tells you to run.